I'm recording that.
Good. Yeah.
Everybody knows.
Great.
Recording
Yeah.
warning, recording warning. Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm recovering. I'm cursing my past self for like scheduling everything I have to do today, but it is what it
I
is,
know. It must be, no, I was thinking of you that you must just be getting home. It's like a lot,
Yeah, I didn't get home
so
till really late last night, and then I have
it was
a
a really
performance
long,
tonight when I'm
great
done.
weekend, but it was really intense. Yeah. Elizabeth, have you ever been to the occult conference?
I have not. Where is the occult conference?
It's the NYU Humanities Occult Conference, and it was great. We did a lecture with a group of artists, and then Lilith did a great lecture as
Oh,
well.
that sounds
And
amazing.
many people, all day. It was like a
Yeah.
sold out packed conference.
It
So it was
was, it was
great.
wonderful. It was such
Yeah,
an
it was
honor to
really
be
great.
there.
Yeah, I had a great time. I'd never been either.
Me
Wow.
either.
Well, thanks for telling me about it. I'll definitely check it
Yeah, you should
out.
put it on your list. I think they do it every other year,
Okay.
but there's another magic conference this winter in Baltimore
Oh, okay.
that Matt Oren does. And I went last year.
Oh,
That was really good.
oh, cool. Okay.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Look for that.
Yay. All right. I'm gonna see if I can get this going on. I Zoom updated, right? Like, so whenever it updates, I've got goddess knows what happening right here. So that's where we're at right now. So we'll see. We'll see. Oh, technology gods, love us so.
Yeah,
I
so
hope,
good.
I hope, I hope. Right on, right on. Okay, well, I'm going to get started. I'm going to start with just I know a lot of you took the intro thing that I did for Morbid Anatomy a few weeks ago, just an overview pretty much of what was happening and what was going to be happening in this class. So some of that might be a little bit of stuff you've already heard, but this is a huge topic. I was going over my notes and everything today, and I was just like, this is just a huge, huge, huge amount. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about me. This is the little bit about me slide that I managed to put together. So you can see the little bit about me slide. I always have to start by honoring all my godmothers. I have three godmothers in African traditional religions. I think a lot of people think I'm a dilettante or whatever, but it just sort of played out that way. They all came into my life at different times, and I'm so grateful for them, even though some of them are no longer with us. But in the top over here on I guess when you're looking at it on the right, drumming, that's my priestess Gro Mambo Bonnie Devlin. A lot of people know Bonnie Devlin because she was master drummer. She was a sambista. She initiated into La Regla Lacumi or Santeria. She was a Harvard trained minister that she went to divinity school. She became a UU minister, and she sort of used her music therapy and her talents to sort of get her message across a much wider audience, right? Like that's the beauty of UU churches, that they welcome everybody from different traditions and things like that. So she was amazing. I think I do need to say this because she used to get a lot of, okay, like what's your heritage? Is this cultural appropriation and stuff like that? And she was adopted. And I think it's funny because my other godmother, Yere Oshun Olakari Alaye, was also adopted. So there was and this was before everybody was getting DNA tested every 5 minutes. So there was a sort of guessing kind of game going on with them as to whether or not they had any African heritage. But they both spent a large amount of time in the communities that they worked with, approaching it both as a scholar and an artist and a practitioner, and bringing all of that to the world. And I think one of the things that was really special to me about Bonnie is she dedicated her life's work to working with special needs children. So that was beautiful to me. You can see some of those sessions on YouTube. Fortunately, a couple of them were captured before her death. But what's really most valuable to me is she put together 2 CDs at the time that you can get from Apple Music and things like that, that were rituals in and of themselves from start to finish. She's like Prince. She played all the music, she sang all the songs, she mixed the thing all herself and put together a little ritual from start to finish that people can play when they don't necessarily have musicians there live working with them. So they're both beautiful compilations. The first one was called Action of Grace, and it's really beautiful. Like I said, it's a whole thing from start to finish, and that's just a lovely thing, I think, to sort of accompany some of the magical things that people are doing, again, if they don't have musicians or stuff like that. And I'll tell my personal story here, even though it's a little sad. I had been working at the UU church where she came to be minister, and it was right after my daughter had been murdered. And Bonnie had never initiated anybody. And she came to me and she said, I think I need to initiate you. I think you need this right now. So as far as I know, if anybody else is out there that got initiated by her, please let me know. But she initiated me and my daughter and my mother, and it was a really beautiful thing. And we kept that bond and still keep that bond, even though that she's not here on this plane anymore. But I miss her every day. My first priestess in New Orleans voodoo was Priestess Miriam. You can see 3 different pictures of her here. That is, Priestess Miriam likes to get dressed up. The one in the center is when her and Dr. John were king and queen of the Croix de Vaux parade. If anybody wants to come down to New Orleans, Croix de Vaux is the parade to see. It's the political parade, it's the raunchy parade, it's the parade that I think I always have the most fun at Croix de Vaux. It's wild. And I, fortunately enough, got to ride on this float with them, which was great. And we had a lot of fun. That was 2010. These other pictures of me and Priestess Miriam, the one immediately below it, that's from Voodoo Day here in New Orleans, the first year we did it, which was 2 years ago. That's in Congo Square, which is a site of historic importance both for enslaved people and indigenous people here in New Orleans. And the other one, where Priestess Miriam had a snake on her head, she said the people from Benin were coming, so she had to put her snake on her head so they would feel welcome and at home. And everybody loved it. So there she is with her snake on her head, giving a blessing for everybody. And the other picture is me with a snake wrapped around my neck from our trip to Benin in the summer of 2024 at the Temple of Pythons, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today. But I initiated in all these things, not, as I said, because I was trying to become a dilettante, but because it just sort of happened that way. I was friends with all of these people before they initiated me, and through divination and readings and things like that, in order for me to serve my proper path, the divination said that I had to initiate. So that's how it kind of happened that way. Most people here in the United States do not initiate in more than one tradition, but things are slightly different in Benin and Nigeria, which we're going to be talking about today. So let me get the next slide up if it lets me do it. Come on, you can do it. You can do it, little computer. I love you. Okay, here we go. I know I'm insane. I'm looking at you. You're like, this woman's out of her mind. But we can handle it. We can handle it. Okay. This is one of the few maps that I've seen. This isn't something, unfortunately, that most people have done an extensive amount of work. I think probably because some of the slave records are missing and things of that nature. But we talk about these religions, the birthplace of these religions, starting in West Africa. This is a map, as comprehensive a map as could be produced, about the slave trade and how we seem to have gotten all these people from Africa to the Central America, the Caribbean, and North America. You see a large numbers right here coming from Benin, Gold Coast, Biafra, West Central Africa. So you've got primarily 2 really large groups of people. And even when you have people going through these slave ports that were not necessarily from that immediate area, they were still under the control of the people who did own that land, right? There's a very contentious relationship about excuse me, people being sold by pretty much their neighbors into slavery. And a lot of times the last gods or religious rituals and things like that they saw before they left were these gods and things like that. Some people in the traditional say that the reason that those two regions, Benin and Nigeria, and their gods and their religions took over were because they were stronger. Obviously, that's right. The history is written by the victors, so they're going to say that those systems were stronger. But that is primarily the two systems that we see in the diaspora following slavery and moving on today. So we've got this huge amount of influx. And basically, let's see if I can get you the next share. Okay. So basically, we've got this huge amount of influx of enslaved people. And what I didn't realize when we were, let's see, okay, here we go. What I didn't realize until I was there was that they were held for a very long time. So you've got spaces there where, you know, monuments, statues to children being chained to their parents' dead bodies and things of that nature. It's just really, really horrible history that we can't deny. And yeah, here's another smaller picture of it. Okay, so as I said, we're talking about these two areas now. What happened? Come on. Okay. All right, my computer's having a little moment. All right, so we've got those two areas here, Benin, which is kind of sort of a little bit highlighted on the map, and then Nigeria, which is below it. Neither of them are very large countries, so that's an interesting thing to think of when we look at it. We're looking at these two small countries. I'm going to start with Benin. They call themselves the birthplace of voodoo. Benin, some of the temples and things like that that you see in Benin go back thousands of years. Pretty much they are talking 4, 5, 6,000 years. You get a different answer every time you ask someone. So that's beautiful, right? That's Africa for you. But we've got temples there specifically. I want to show you some pictures from the Sacred Forest Temple. Come on, come on. You can do it. The Sacred Forest Temple that is outside Ouida in Benin. Okay, an empty slide. Thanks. That's helpful. All right. We've got some pictures. I'll pull up another picture. The Sacred Forest, as I said, there have been temples there for thousands of years. The actual standing temple that is there was burned down, they say, probably about 300 or 400 years ago, but there has been a temple on that site for thousands of years. Primarily, this is where you get this. I grew up looking at this picture over and over again, and it's so wild to me that I finally got to stand in front of the statue. Why doesn't it want to show any of my things? Okay, fine. Don't show any of my pictures. I'll just talk. How about that? Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Okay. So you've got, I apologize. Technology is not working with it. We'll get there. We'll get there. I promise we will. Oh, look, it stopped as all the windows have closed. Okay. So you've got this giant statue of Legba there. Legba is seen as the guardian of the crossroads, the gatekeeper. Legba is said to be petitioned before all others. He's kind of seen as like a paternal image, a wise father. No, not happening. A wise father. One of the things that I love about him is that it's said that he has grown so old that his penis is falling off and he's now using it as a cane. So when you hear the drum beats for him, they go in a very specific rhythm of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And my priest Louis Martinet from here in New Orleans likes to say that is because he is having sex with the earth as he moves forward. He's lost all hope of regular sex, so he's just giving back to the earth now at this point. So I think that's kind of an interesting metaphor for things. And you'll see later when we move on to some of the other systems, he's really the only one that gets depicted as a older gentleman. And this has been messed up in the media over and over again, sort of turning him into a barren figure, an older figure, this kind of figure of death. But that's not his story at all. What he really is the energy that's at the crossroads, the sacred energy of potential that moves through the universe, hence his connection to fertility and things of that nature, which I think is fascinating because what we're talking about is these energies as they move forward throughout the universe. And his energy is, why are they all disappearing? I apologize. His energy is moving throughout the universe. Well, I'll just stick this back up there and see what happens.
Would you mind sharing his name again? What he's called?
He's called, the statue that there, he's pictured Tolegba, Tolegba, but normally it's just Legba, Legba. I think toe legba is supposed to be a particular variation, probably toe legba coming from Togo, because a lot of their influences are mixed with their neighbor Togo. So it's Legba. I can put it in the chat. There we go. Legba. All right. Maybe we aren't meant to see them. Yeah, there's been a lot of that this weekend. It's everybody talking about UFOs and things like that. We've kind of already pre-designed ourselves to have problems. So that's where we are. But okay, so Legba's really not even a father because he doesn't necessarily get this kind of paternal as opposed to maternal. There's a very different structure when we're talking about gender, especially in Benin. And it's funny because there are a lot of still taboos and things like that about homosexuality. But when we look at the structure of divinity in Benin, it's much more balanced between male and female. So all of the deities are thought of as both male and female simultaneously coming through these things, which I think is fascinating, right? Because what we're looking at is something that has both of those energies united. And when I explained to them that here in the US, we don't necessarily have female components to some of these deities, they gave me a dirty look and said, well, that's why you're so unbalanced in the United States. Which I thought was beautiful, right? Like, okay, so even though that we've looked at these people that obviously this religion has gone up, the earliest written record of the religions in West Africa, written record I'm talking about right now, goes back to about the 4th century BCE with a written record about Shango. But obviously, this was taking place way earlier than that. There were just no written records of it or things of that nature. So we've got these divinities like Legba coming as this guardian because it allows us to go on our journey. One of the reasons we call him first is because when we get to a crossroads, there's crossroads, right? 2 roads are coming together. So there's 4 choices. You could go in each direction. And all of this goes to the sacred geometry of the paths, but there are so many choices. So what he really is that magic energy of choice, of potential, of being able to take any different path that is in front of you. And each one of those paths is going to have a different outcome. So Legba helps guide you towards what the proper outcome is for you. One of the outcomes might have a leopard on it, but that's not supposed to be your destiny. One of them might have a kitten on it that you're supposed to adopt. All of these things work into your own personal destiny. And all of the African traditional religions are about applying your specific destiny and how you can manifest what's best for you through the help of divination, through the help of prayer, through the help of guidance from your teachers and things like that. So Legba is thought of in a way as that kind of first teacher that comes to you. The other 2 deities that we see very often in the Benin Vodou are Dambala and Ayudawedo. Dambala is said to be, the stories about the serpent and the rainbow, right? Dambala is said to be the sky father who goes underneath the oceans to bring the religion to the New World. And Ayudawedo is said to be the crown of the rainbow. And they come together and they meet here in the United States. Oh, look, it showed up again. Let's see if I can get this up here. Some people specifically, okay, it just doesn't want to show any of my images. Okay, some people specifically Milo Rigaud, who was an anthropologist who did a lot of work in the 30s and 40s. He was French, and he sent his students out to Haiti to go and do field work and take names and to compare them with the tradition. And Milo Rigaud equates Damballa with the forces of the Ba and the Ka. So if we look at Egyptian mythology and things of that nature, we are looking at those two forces as they reunite in the universe. So you've got Damballa being the Ba, right? Like, so coming down and bringing forth and allowing this masculine energy into the universe, and Ayuda Wedo being the feminine force that comes down, and they intertwine sort of like a caduceus to bring the religion throughout the space. It's interesting because what we look at is that we look at Damballa and Ayuda Wedo together, and we look at them as sort of standing outside of the regular pantheon of deities, which is interesting because what we have is them kind of not interfering. This is sort of both with Legba and Damballa and Ayuda Wedo. It's always this kind of deus ex machina. They're not necessarily ones, especially in Benin, that are brought to the petitions and offerings in order to change your life. It's more that they stand and keep the structure of the universe intact. We see them very often as symbols like Ouroboroses, where they are given this kind of constant cyclical nature. They're constantly eating their tails. They're constantly going around and around and around in this circle of beginning and ending and cycles of time that operate in a different system that we are used to, especially here in the West, right? Like it's a larger system, and we're talking about thousands and thousands of years of time that we're going through. So that's beautiful. I appreciate that a lot. I'm going to try one more time. I don't know why it shows it here for me and not you, but I'm determined here.
Lilith, is it a PowerPoint? It's open on your screen already?
No, there are pictures that are open on my screen
Pictures.
already.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes I have problems if things are not opened already before I share it.
Yeah, I open them. That's what's
Yeah,
confusing
yeah.
to me. I'm thinking maybe there's too many open. That might be a thing
Hmm.
because there's a lot of them. I think that might be the issue. But they're here on my thing. When I look at it, that's what's so disturbing to me, that they're not showing. All right, well, we'll keep trying. We'll keep trying. Let's try this one.
If they don't pop up, would you mind terribly typing the names of those two?
Sure, that's
Thank you.
fine. I can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Let's open the chat. Yeah, it just won't let me open them. That's delightful. Okay. All right. So we've got, and again, this is, in addition to being a Creole throughout the world, this is also a Creole when we look at it in Africa, because there's so many different tribal languages, and for so long they weren't written languages. So what we're looking at is lots of different spellings, obviously, but I'm going to give you what I can. Dambala is either Dambala or Dambala. I know that sounds like I said the same thing, but here you go. And usually after it is Wedo. That's what we say in Haiti. But what I usually tell people is to say it out loud, right? Like what it comes from is Weda. So even though it's inherently contained in the name, it's Dambala or Donbala, Wedo or Weda, because the city is Weda, right? So you've got the name from where this divinity came from in its own name. So when you've got enslaved people praying to it, they know that this is the Dambala that came from Weda, which is the port where so many people left and things of that nature. And his wife is named Aida. And similarly to Dambala, it's also, oops, Weda. And what I was trying to show you in the slides is it actually says it in 3 different ways on the temple, which I think is hilarious, right? Like you've got this thing where it is literally shown simultaneously in, oh, okay, yes, this is from Weda, this is from Weda, or this is from Weda. So it's got all of those things together. And I think that's fascinating because it allows you to have this kind of thing where it's just this, okay, I'm coming here and I know that as Dambala Wedo with the W. I know it with oh, I know it with this other thing. So it's like incorporating all those different things and allowing people to come to it as part of their own experience. So what they have here in the Sacre Fare that I can't show you today, unfortunately, is all these sacred statuary, right? They've got the sacred statuary on the temple for Damballa and the Udawedo. Interestingly enough, it is one of the few places where they worship serpents, and Benin is similar to some of the places in Haiti, but it is one of these, you might even call it a cult, right? Like, because we have such serpent worship. What they have there is a temple of pythons, and the temple of pythons is, it's illegal to kill a serpent of any kind in Benin. And the pythons, if you find a python, what you have to do is pick it up and bring it to the Temple of Pythons. And there they have a whole little temple there for the pythons. They have a spiritual temple next door where they do rituals and the priests go. You can tell the priests, it's a generational thing for the priests. So you can tell the priests by their tribal scarification markings. It's usually 3 lines on one side and 2 lines on the other that are scarified on their face, and they say that that mimics the actual lines on a python's face. I don't know, I didn't really look at a python's face, but I take their word for it. So you have these people that are growing up from their entire lives being there to be caretaker of the pythons, that they're not locked up or anything like that. They're sort of allowed to go and come as they please, and it's sort of, I mean, it's a tourist attraction, but it's also a sacred temple, so they do rituals there. We got there on the one day of the week where you were allowed to actually do ritual and leave offerings for them. They told us we couldn't go in unless we were initiates, and we said, well, we are initiates, we're your initiates from across the water. So that was beautiful. We got to go in the temple and leave offerings for them, and they were very nice and very helpful, talking to us about how this was their lineage, that they really truly identify as their lineage being the snake, their lineage created from the original Damballa and Ayudawedo, and that their lineage allows them to become priests and honor these snakes going forward throughout their lives. So it's a beautiful thing, I think, to be able to have that kind of living temple where people can go and come back and things of that nature. So those are the two main things that we have there. We have this kind of worship of the divinities. We've got Legba, we've got Damballa. I'm going to put a few more of their main divinities in Benin in the chat, since these slides don't seem to be working for me. Okay, we've got 2 different Oguns, which is very interesting because, again, here in the United States, we only have a male Ogun. He's usually a divinity for technology, for war. If we look at his sacred energy, Ogun is said to be the sacred energy of the forge. So that kind of moment when iron is in the hot fire getting forged and shaped into something else. So it's kind of that raw energy of metal and flame together to make something that's going to be useful, right? To make a tool, to make something, what do you call those things? A tool for surgery, a tool for gardening, a tool for war. All of those things are sort of underneath the umbrella of the forge. And what they have there in the Sacre Fare is a sacred female Ogun, which is fantastic. She kind of looks like the Tin Man from The Wiz, right? Like it's all this reclaimed metal that's sort of forged together and put together into this beautiful creation that is the female Ogu. And again, as I said, these two go side by side, they go together. Sometimes in the Fon language, they call it gu. So it's just these, just 2 letters, GU. So again, how do you say it, right? Like it's not Ogu, it's Gu. And you can see how from village to village, from different linguistic, variations and things like that, that it's the same energy that gets identified, but different words are attached to it because different people are kind of coming in and worshiping them and things of that nature. We have one that's absolutely beautiful that really, I think, fell out of favor for a long time, which is Mami Wata and Papi Wata. Again, we don't, here in the United States, we don't have a Papi Wata, but there in Benin, they have a Papi Wata. Very frequently, the Mami Wata and the Papi Wata, what you see is this kind of double-tailed mermaid associated with Mami Wata. There's a German perfume ad, I think, from the 1830s that features Mami Wata as this exotic fragrance that they got from Africa, and it shows the double-tailed mermaid, which I find ironic because, there was a whole bunch of sort of hubbub within the pagan witchcraft community when Starbucks adopted the double-tailed mermaid. Anybody who knows Oberon Zell, he tried to claim he invented the double-tailed mermaid. I love Oberon, but you did not invent the double-tailed mermaid. That goes back thousands of years in Africa, and we see this. And it's almost in a way like she splits her tail and she's holding both ends of the tail as potential, right? Unrealized potential in this world and the next that you can grab on through going beneath the waters, having that kind of knowledge. It's usually said that the waters are representative of the ancestors. So anything that we get deep in the waters are with the ancestors. And that's where they gain the knowledge. So that's pretty much what we have there. There's a few other ones. We get an image which in other traditions are called Shango, that they call Hevioso, which is Bioso. Whoops, is that spelled right? Hevioso. Again, there's variation in these things, but that's seen as the sacred energy of fire, very protective energy, an energy that's very frequently connected to the drum and the dance and that kind of ceremony and things like that move into it. I did want to also talk a little bit about the actual origins of the word voodoo, and hopefully my slide about other resources will show up. But for now, I'm going to just read it to you here. I was always taught, just growing up in the tradition, that voodoo in general, the word meant spirit or deity. There is a linguistic analysis in this Vodou in coastal Benin, which I will put in the chat later. But there's a Capuchin monk who translates it back as godly or sacred, and that was 350 years ago that he translated it as that. Herskovitz says, we all know Herskovitz, right? Like in 1937, defined it as all manifestations of power that cannot be defined, which I think is a beautiful way of looking at the word voodoo, right? Like, we've got also breaking it down from the Fawn in 95, Michael Bagbono in a town near Abome, which is in central Benin, talks about it coming from Don, meaning dew, which is a symbol in Fawn divination. So this sense of that it comes from voodoo is a sort of transmutation of the word Odu, which we'll see in a minute in Nigeria, is the divination system. So it could have been some sort of word for simultaneously spirit, deity, divination system, the unknowable, all those things together. Susan Blyer said that it has to do with to rest or to relax near water, which I think is beautiful because, again, we're talking about this connection to water as the home of the ancestors, the place where the spirits reside, the spirits that are waiting to come back are said to reside in the water. So that's an interesting way of looking at it, as the religion is just resting by this ancestral pond of knowledge and a repository for souls that are waiting to come back and join us again, which I think all of those things are fascinating. You don't really have anyone, and I've said this before, and I apologize, those of you who've heard me say it before, you don't really have one authority when it comes to voodoo. So there's a lot of variation. And when you're talking about the study of these things, there's probably as many definitions about what it is as there are people, in my temple here in New Orleans, there's always people that come in and are like, what's voodoo? And she'll throw you out if you say that. I'll tell you that right now. because it's such a complex system and it's something that you could spend your entire life studying. So this thought that it can be packaged into a neat little couple of sentences, I think is really needs to be thrown out originally before we even start, because it's not something that can be packaged into a neat little thing. We've got a connection to nature. Obviously, each one of these energies that I'm talking to you about right now, they represent the ashe, or the sacred energy of the universe. What we're honoring when we honor them is simultaneously the people that have those characteristics and the actual elemental forces in the universe. For us, there's no difference between those two things. So if somebody, I was talking before about the priests in the Temple of Pythons, for them, they are those pythons, and those pythons are them as well. So it's like not a separation. They are representative of that sacred serpent energy in the universe, the energy of creation, the energy simultaneously of change at the same time, right? Like, because if you're creating something, you're changing something. So it's that ashe of change and creation that's embodied when we look at Damballa and when we look at Aida Wedo. Aida Wedo, to me, more too, is also this sort of change in ways that are marvelous and fantastic, right? That moment where the downpour becomes the rainbow, that moment where we are in the element of nature that seems really oppressive, and nobody likes getting soaked in a rainstorm, right? Like, especially if it's pouring, but everybody loves a rainbow. So it's that moment of transformation where that water becomes potential, that water becomes refracted prismatic potential and can go in any direction. And that's kind of why I explain Damballa and Aida Wedo standing outside of things, the same way that Legba stands outside of things, because they're coming before everything else. They are there with us before, during, and after everything else. So they sort of stand outside it. And especially in Benin, it is not something that they are honored individually. They're not like, oh, okay, I need to get a new job, let me leave a candle for them. It's not like that. It's more of working in symbiosis with them to find the best possible situation for you. Okay, so moving on. Here we go. All right, we have Benin. I've been talking for an hour with Benin and struggling with these slides. So again, I apologize. Even though you've got Benin right near Nigeria, so you've got the Fan people and the Yoruba people, they are very different people. She talks about it, and the Voodoo in coastal Benin is interconnected yet consciously separate, which I think is fascinating. I was fortunate enough to meet the head Babalawo, or diviner priest, for Benin, and he had said to me, I said, well, does everybody also practice Ifa, or Nigerian tradition? And they said, yes, of course. How could you not? Because otherwise you wouldn't have that whole other component of thing and you'll be unbalanced. So there's lots of people practicing lots of different systems simultaneously. Across the street from the Sacre Foray is also a Catholic church. So a whole bunch of them are also going to Catholic church in the morning, and then in the evening are going over to the Benin temple to leave offerings and things like that for those spirits. So there's not this kind of division, I think, between traditions. Almost all of them are practicing all of those things at once. But whereas we have the Vodou or the Vodun religion in Benin, what we have in Nigeria primarily is Ifa. And I'm going to put that in the message thing because there's lots of different things here. It's not letting me put accents in the chat, but there's an accent over the A in Ifa. Ifa is simultaneously the religion. Like, so someone will say to you, I practice Ifa. It's also a divinity. Ifa. The divinity Ifa is also known by the name Orunla, and I'm going to put this in the chat too, or Orunmila. I'm not so sure this isn't some sort of later Christian intervention where we end up with like three faces of God, right? Like, because they have three different names, but they're all seen as the same entity, right? So actually, probably the Christians stole it from them. But you end up with these three sort of creator divinities. If we look at it, they are very frequently connected to another divinity called Obatala. who is said to be the sacred energy of the clouds. So if we're going on, again, what's the element that's represented here by these divinities? What's represented here is the clouds. So that kind of floating above the earth, that kind of floating above the humans in this kind of royal or regal way. They are there. They're sort of seen as kings or queens. Again, gender is very fluid here, and we're not looking at something that's necessarily male or female. But all the deities in this system are called Orisha. This is where we first get the word Orisha. Orisha is a blend of two words. Put this in the chat. Ori, which means head, and Sha, which comes from the word Ashe, which is the universal energy or life force that I'm talking about. So it comes together where this is the universal life force or energy that owns my head or that crowns my head. Both of the expressions like that are used. So what you're doing is you are a representative of that Orisha on earth. When you get your initiations, when you dedicate, you are seen as that divinity here on earth. And to me, it's beautiful because I don't know too many other systems where you get to actually become divine. And that's part of the process of the religion, is to join with the divine in these ways. And I think that's really beautiful. And they sort of pair together and come together. I'm going to show you. Let's see if this works. Come on, we can do it. We can do it. Yay. No, it's not liking any of these. Okay. All right. Fine. It's fine. Okay.
I'll just stick it in the chat, Lilith. That's another thing that may work.
Oh, okay. I can put it in the chat.
Try one, we could see. It might
Okay,
work.
let's say. Yeah, let's try that. I'm ready to try anything here at this point. And I will say this, I did try this before all of you were on here. I really did, I promise. I shared it to myself and they all looked great and everything was wonderful. Okay, here we go. Let's see if I can put it in the chat. Yeah, okay. Let's see, let's see. Okay, come on, you can do it. You can do it. Let's see. Come on. Let's see. Yeah, because I really think it would help you to see some of these. This would be very nice. Let's see. Gonna do it? Maybe? Oh, okay. Well, this isn't the slide I'm up to, but it's gonna looks like it's gonna send it to you. At least that way you'll all have them at least in the chat, right? Hopefully, hopefully. There we go. Yay. All right, there's the different variations of the tradition. Well, at least it's doing something. Yay.
Yeah.
Hooray. Thank you so much. Oh, here's the further reading slide. Okay. That's the further reading slide.
Great.
So you can at least tell what books I'm talking about. This is the let's try that one. That is the slave trade slide. That one it did show you, but it's okay. We'll get there. This is the crapshoot. I'm gonna do a ritual next time, so this way. Or maybe I'll just put them all in the chat next time. That way you'll have it right there. Right? That would be helpful.
Yeah, this works. This is why sometimes I stick mine in PowerPoint, because sometimes they just go like my image. I've had so many issues like this too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I tried the PowerPoint and that wasn't working as well as this was. So,
Yeah, I've had my PowerPoints not work too, so I don't know
yeah,
what they.
I'm just like, oh, here we go. Okay.
But it came through 3 of them, which is
Yeah,
great.
this is coming through, at least some of them. That's good. Right on. Yay.
I I have a quick question, if it's okay.
Sure. Sure.
So, and it's you were like we were like talking, so I didn't want to interrupt you. I have a question about Aida Wido.
Sure.
Um, so you say that you can work with her for like trying to basically like look at the brighter things, right?
Yeah.
So would she be someone good to work with for like maybe like legal actions of things?
I wouldn't work with Aida Uedo for legal things. I would
Okay,
work with, we're not going to talk about her until we get to the New Orleans Voodoo Week, but I would work with Maman Brigitte for legal
okay,
things. Or if we're looking at this pantheon, I would work with Ochosi.
okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand Aida Weiro just like a little deeper and like when would be a good time to like kind of like tap in with her more of my is more my question.
Okay, that makes sense. So Aida Uedo, I think that for me, she's about limiting belief, right? And
Okay.
I did a huge ritual for Aida Uedo once, and it was great. We had all these snakes. We had like a 6 foot albino python, and
Oh
then
wow.
like baby corn snakes. It was great. And I went around and I was telling people to just sort of let go of their limiting beliefs. So if you are
Oh.
out of work, instead of thinking that you're a failure, that you're out of work, you don't have a job or something, and imagine for a minute that that job was removed from your day-to-day existence because a better one is going to come in, or because you're going to get funding for your next project, or you're going to get, you know, an inheritance or whatever it is. But it's about imagining things better than you can possibly imagine. And it was,
Okay, I see.
yeah, it was so hard though. People were like terrified. People did not want to let go of, well, oh, okay, well, if I start thinking I need a better car, then the car I have is going to break down. If I start thinking that, like, I need this other thing, then what I have is going to be taken. I don't know if it's, again, sort of institutional Christian guilt or something, but
Hmm.
they started really resisting the fact that they couldn't even imagine manifesting something that was so wonderful for them. So for me, that's what Aida Uedo in a way is kind of like, what gets rid of the shadow self that's holding you down the rainbow, right? So it's about like getting rid of all of those things that you've hidden in the shadow that might be holding you back, and opening up yourself to this potential of something that's so much better, so much better. So that's where we are kind of with that.
Wow. Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for saying all that because I've never really heard a lot about her and specifically what she does, and that I'm actually really glad I asked that because that applies so much to my life right now. So
Oh,
thank you for
sure,
that.
totally, totally. Like, yeah, yeah. No, I love it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. That's where we're at.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Oh, no problem. Okay, now it's not letting me upload the rest of them to the chat. It's decided none of them exist. Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's definitely something going on here. Some sort of weird energy or whatnot. All right. Well, at least you got those 4 slides in there. We'll see how it goes as we move forward. Maybe if I close some of these slides, that way I can open them again and something will happen. We'll see what happens. Okay. So any other questions before I move on? All right. We're moving on to the Yoruba people in Nigeria. This is pretty much the progenitor, and I did put the slide with the different variations of the tradition. When we look at where it went, and now obviously it's not confined to, people who practice Vodou are in Haiti, people who practice, Santo are in Puerto Rico. But for a long time, it was very localized. And what it did was we weren't just talking about these initial traditions and things coming from that area. It was picking up the energy of the indigenous people of the land. It was picking up the character of the spirit of place as they got transformed. But when we look at it, the base of what we're looking at in Haiti is coming from Benin and that kind of system of belief. When we look at, and Haiti, because it was isolated, right? Like, so it ends up with different kinds of practices because it was isolated, because it had independence. Whereas if you look at something like Cuba, or, Puerto Rico, that had much more of a close occupation, I think, for a longer time. Some people would still argue that Puerto Rico is still being occupied, but it was developed in a different way. But what we're looking at when we look at Cuba and Puerto Rico primarily is what we're looking at, the systems that come from the Yoruba in Nigeria. It's not Yoruba, it's Yoruba. Okay, that's a typo. There you go. Not Yoruba, Yoruba. So these are the systems that we see when we're there are much more primal. That's what I'm going to say. We've got a huge UNESCO World Heritage Site at Oshun Grove in Nigeria. So what they do when they leave offerings is honor the Ashe of the space. The Oshun Grove in Nigeria, it's the only World Heritage Site in Nigeria. What it is the Oshun River is there. So that was the site where people would go to honor the Orisha Oshun. I'll put that in the chat. Usually Oshun in Yoruba has a two dot umlaut thing over the U, but it's pronounced Oshun. It's pronounced differently in Caribbean countries and things like that, but we'll get to there when we get that. But she's the sacred energy of the river. She's probably the most popular of all the deities. So that's why I find it really interesting that she is the sort of one that got the big World Heritage Site and all the grant money and things like that. There's a beautiful sculptural installation there that I find fascinating. So that is there. People go there to leave offerings. There's temples. There's all these different sort of art offerings that people have done there. But originally, it was just a site for going to the river where Oshun was and leaving your oranges or leaving your other offerings. So you could align yourself with the spirit of the river. She's in charge of love. She's in charge of money. She's in charge of fertility. She's in charge of a lot of these really base things that I think people have concerns with throughout time, right? Like, so in that way, she sort of resonates in that kind of divine, sacred, feminine way. And she is present there. But some of these deities that we might be familiar that I just talked about coming from Benin are also present in different ways in Nigeria. So when we look at Legba, who I mentioned, the wise father with the big, erection kind of situation, here is seen as Eshu. Here, the crossroads are inhabited by usually a child that is seen as a trickster. So in this same kind of way that we've got on this end somebody very old, on this end we've got somebody very young, and for them again that's the same thing, because what we're measuring when we measure African cosmology is not actual linear measurement. What it is distance from the center, which I think is a fascinating point, right? Like, so for them, somebody who's very old is the same thing as somebody who's very young, because they're both equidistant from this middle age kind of thing. So these things are seen as different sides of the same coin, but performing the same function. And Elegua is said to be the one who is on that path, in that crossroads, making you really, really confused and putting things in your way that you're not sure which way to go. And that's part of the fun of it, right? Like he's guiding you down through this space. And I'll put that in the chat sense again. You spell it differently everywhere you're at, but Eshu in Nigeria is usually ESHU or ESU with the umlaut over the U. There we go, right on. And here we're talking about this trickster energy, not just being the energy of the divine, but also this liminal space, right? This master of this in-between space that you can navigate all things. He's sort of the great, watch a lot of Sesame Street, right? The great in-betweeny. So he sort of resonates with this great in-betweeny kind of energy where he's always standing in between these two spaces. And I'm going to read you a story about us. We have sacred stories in all the African traditional religions. This is a Yoruba sacred story. And what they usually say about Eshu is that Eshu lies down in bed and bumps his head on the ceiling, which I think that's just a beautiful way of encapsulating what it is to have that Eshu energy. But I'm going to tell you this short story. Eshu was walking down the road one day when he overheard two brothers on opposite sides of the road talking. The brothers were dressed alike, had the same mannerisms, and appeared to be close friends. The first brother said, "Thank you, my brother, for helping me with my crops and living so close by that I can borrow your tools. You are a very good brother." The second brother replied, "You are welcome, my brother. Thank you for your help with my farm and for letting me store my grain with yours. The crops look wonderful, and you are a very good brother." All this harmony made Eshu quite nauseous, so he decided to stick his crooked cane into the situation. He got a hat that was colored black on one side and white on the other. He put it on and proceeded to walk straight down the road between the two brothers. One brother said to the other, "Did you see that guy with the black hat?" The other brother replied, "I only saw a man with a white hat. What were you talking about?" An argument quickly ensued. Soon the brothers were fighting and destroying their farms. This affected the food supply for the whole kingdom, and it wasn't long before the king got involved. He ordered the people to find Eshu and bring him back so he could be punished for causing so much trouble. As always, Eshu was a few steps ahead of him. He had decided to leave the kingdom. As he left, however, he set fire to the houses he passed. When the people ran out of their homes carrying their belongings, he offered to keep an eye on them. He then gave the stuff to the next passerby, scattering the people's possessions all across the land. So that's a perfect Eshu story, right? Like he's just messing things up from beginning to end and working as an equalizer, right? Like the harmony between the two brothers made him sick. So he decided to stick himself in that, right? And both of those things were true in that moment. One person saw a white hat, one person saw a black hat. Both of those things were true, but they did not trust the other one enough to just say, "Oh, okay, you saw what you saw and I saw what I saw, and that's fine." Instead, they chose to fight because one of them had to be right. Right? That's the thing. One of us has to be right. You're wrong. I'm right. I'm wrong. You're right. So it turned into this kind of let's shake things up in the situation. And if you meet somebody who's a child of Eshu, they are some of the most contrary people you will ever meet. They are always messing things up. They are always having that kind of just thing in your side where they're saying stuff to stir up trouble or to create trouble. Even in the end, when he's leaving, right? He's setting everything on fire and then he's taking the people's possessions and giving them to somewhere else. So he's this great equalizer. This, and we see this a lot in African traditional religion. These things that work as an equalizer for society. So we make sure one person doesn't get too much wealth, doesn't get too much prestige. That there's all these things sort of going together and being equalized in all of that. I wish I could put the names of all the Orisha into the chat, but there's at least 401. Some people say 1,001. It's as many as you can imagine and add one more. So there's a lot of them out there. There are in La Regla Lakumi, there's pretty much 5 big ones that you do. But in the Yoruba, the ones that you're going to meet most often are Eshu, Oshun, you're going to talk about very often. Oya, who is the Ashe or the sacred energy of the cemetery. You're going to talk about, I put Obatala in there before, so you're going to talk about Obatala, who is the Ashe of the clouds. You are going to talk about Shango, who I mentioned before, usually with an accent over the O. Shango, who's the energy of fire. Here we get an Ogun that is similar to, but not, you don't get a female one in Nigeria. But you get one that is similar to the one in Benin, again, being in charge of the military, being in charge of medicine, being in charge of the forest. Almost all the Ogun stories, he gets so frustrated and angry and annoyed with people, he just sort of isolates himself off in the forest. Again, with this kind of character of the blacksmith, right? Like the someone who's just out there by themselves, working at the forge or working in the forest on their sacred knowledge so they can use that to protect the community. And each one of them had their own specific powers. Each one of them had their own specific niches. Originally, when you used to go back, again, it was family lineages. So people would be born into an Ogun lineage, similar to the family of pythons that I mentioned before. You'd be born underneath the energy or the ashe of a certain Orisha, and that would be the one you worship. But now, because everybody's all spread out and all over the world, what there is divination is done, and that's how you get determined to what's going to be the specific thing about this is what domain it contains and where it's situated. So Again, this is a huge topic. I apologize. It's very confusing and I don't have my slides. But basically, what we're working with is a structure of Orisha that people go to. And each one of them, as I said, has their own sacred stories. In Ifa, it is very heavily based on divination. As I mentioned before, even in Benin, they will go to Ifa diviners, so nothing is done without divination. Divination is done primarily two ways. It's either done with something called an oponifa, put that in the chat, which literally means oponifa, so opon being the board, ifa being the deity. So the oponifa is the board, the diviner's board that they use. They lay this out on the ground, and that's where either the cowrie shells or they have a divining chain which has kola nuts or betel nuts attached to a chain. And what they will do is shake the chain and then throw that on the board. And it is the same way that they would shake the shells and throw it on the board. And then it's similar. I mean, again, it's similar in the sense that there's a limited number of combinations, 256 you could come up with, similar to the I Ching. So how it falls, is it going to fall up? Is it going to fall down? So basically the things that it comes out with will give you a specific reading. Each one of those readings will have a story that you will tell someone, and that story will be relevant to whatever it is they're asking. So maybe the story that you get when you get that reading will be the Elegua story with the red hat and the black hat, and maybe that's a warning or a cautionary tale to you to not get too hung up on details or not be too argumentative in a situation. And between the priest diviner and what it actually says in the sacred story, you figure out exactly what it is you're supposed to leave as offerings and how you can realign your destiny with your proper path. So lots of times these things have these kinds of sacred energy stories, retelling, so you can apply it to your life. We're not talking about the Caribbean variations of the tradition tonight, but what we are talking about, I do want to mention this, as I said, when you get initiated into the tradition, and then you are seen as a child of one of these Orisha or a child of two of these Orisha. Again, depending on your spiritual house, you could be given one Orisha for your head and another one for your feet. Some houses you get a mother and a father, so it's like you have two celestial parents that are guiding you, and it tells you what your character is. It tells you what your destiny is. For example, I am a child of Oshun, which there are a lot of sacred stories about how she either poisoned somebody or got poisoned by somebody. So anybody who is dedicated to Oshun has to be really, really careful about what they eat. They have to be really careful about food that might be, ready to spoil, or eating at somebody else's house that they don't trust. And it just sort of comes with their character. And my favorite story about this is Nozaki Shange, the playwright, wrote a story where she said she was, true story, about where she was teaching writing, creative writing to kids in the Caribbean, I think in Trinidad, maybe. And she had asked the kids to write a story about their lives, and every single one of the kids wrote an Orisha story. And I thought that was beautiful because they knew what Orisha they were aligned with, and the way they saw their life was aligned with that Orisha. So if they were telling a story about how they went to their friend's house and they ate too much candy and they got sick, and they should have known better because they knew that they were a child of Oshun and they had a weak stomach and they shouldn't eat a bunch of candy and then expect to not get sick. So it's a way that you can frame your life and frame your circumstances and understand better how these things work for you and how to navigate it, right? Like Oshun is notorious, always has problems with love or money. And it's said that when she gets to a certain age, she gives up worrying about one and then the other one sort of works out for her. And that's always the way it goes, right? So there's lots of ways in which each of these things can help somebody guide their destiny and see how they're going to proceed successfully throughout life. Each one of these Orisha has an extensive list of hundreds of herbs that they're offered, hundreds of different foods that they're offered, drum beats, music. People spend their whole life learning sacred songs for these Orisha and things like that. So it's really not something where you can just sort of pick it up and decide that I'm going to do this and then this is going to happen, because it really is sort of a lifelong study. And once you align yourself with these different divinities, then knowing how to navigate certain things effectively through divination, through study, through proper offerings and things of that nature. So that's all of that said. All right, there was a couple more things that I did want to tell you about the tradition. It is not horrendously based on initiation the way it is here in the United States, which is interesting because here we're, I think probably again for financial reasons and because we're not in the same sort of community structure. Traditionally, what you would do if you wanted to initiate in Nigeria is you would go and you'd live there for a year or longer, learning the different sacred chants and herbs and dances, assisting the community and really being part of it. And sometimes in the diaspora, what you found was sort of shortcuts where people were going to give money, and then that adds its own set of problems, right? Like, so instead of being part of the community and working with that community for a year plus or longer, lifetime, really, right? Like, because if you join a community, there's no getting out of it. That's your family, the same way that it's your physical family, it's your spiritual family for life. So you're there learning and working towards those things and moving forward. So that's kind of how that goes, but there's less of that individual initiation and more actual guidance. They do still have priests and priestesses, babalawos, they call them that there, the same way that they call them that in La Regla Lacumi, but they are gone to for divination purposes, and there's a structure in that. Each one of those has their own babalawo that they consult, so nobody's above reproach, which I also think is interesting. So even though there's no like one high official that decides everything about the tradition, every single person who is in the tradition has people under them that study with them like children, and has people above them like spiritual godparents that guide them. So it really is kind of like you're joining this spiritual family that allows you to be part of these kinds of things. All right, I'm going to tell you a creation myth from the Yoruba, which I think is beautiful. Here we go. According to the mythology of the Yoruba, in the beginning of time, the world was born in water and marshland. The Orisha lived in the sky and would travel down to the earth on glistening spider webs to play and enjoy themselves. Olodumare, the creator deity, decided one day to create some firm earth amid the marsh. He sent the Orisha Nala, perhaps a permutation of the Orisha Arunla, to the world below with a snail shell containing a pigeon and a hen. Nala placed the birds down on the marshland and they kicked up a storm. Scratching and digging, they continued until the land began to form. Olodumare then sent a sacred chameleon down to the ground to inspect the work. The chameleon reported the ground to be still too watery. Nala was sent again to make sure the land was both wide and dry, and when he stopped, the city of Ile Ife had been created. The name translates roughly to wide home, and Ile Ife has been the center of Yoruba sacred culture for hundreds of years. So that's their logic about how the land was created. The land was created through the power of the Orisha for the people so that they could grow and flourish. But obviously, remembering where they came from, honoring the land, honoring the space, and honoring the energy of everything that takes place there. So it's just, as I mentioned, a very different way of approaching spirituality, especially if you're used to a Western way of doing things. It's much more of a harmonious way of doing things, not just with nature, but with your own self, right? Like we talk about Iwapele in Yoruba tradition, and Iwapele means good character. So everybody talks about having good character. So are you doing the right thing in the situation? The right thing sometimes might be, like Les Mis, the right thing might be sometimes to steal bread if you're hungry. That's not wrong. It's not like this 10 commandments, don't steal. Stealing is always bad. It's very situational and nuanced, and doing the right thing for you and for the other people in the situation is always highlighted. So that's why we need diviners in order to guide us. That's why we need to know all these different things in order to guide us, because there are rules that have been laid out for thousands of years. There's no self-initiation in these traditions, because that would sort of get rid of the need for this advisory system. And that advisory system is very important. A lot of people have tried to do away with it. I was asked last weekend, what are the changes? I think one of the changes that I've seen that's been really bad in the past, 20 or 30 years is that we're moving away from community. And these things were always created within a community. So you end up with people who are, right, like everybody's heard of the Nigerian scammers online. So you end up with so many people scamming online, so many people lying, so many people misrepresenting. And at their core, these are secret traditions. So it's easy for people to lie and misrepresent. Even before we had the internet, it was easy for people to lie and misrepresent. And some people just have really crappy character. If you look at the sacred stories, some of them are that, this person's a liar. They're never going to amount to anything. Watch out for them, right? Like, so you get that in your reading. You're like, oh no, right? This is my natural character. I'm a liar. I'm dishonest. But it allows for the full range of experience within each individual person and sort of explains it in a cosmic way, because each of these people are very effective in their own way in the universe. Some people hearing the Elegua story, or the Eshu story rather, might think that, oh, that was really mean of him to set everybody's house on fire. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is his energy is to turn everything upside down. His energy is to make everything confused. His energy is to make everything different and to make people understand that maybe they have the security of their crops one day or the security of their home one day, and maybe they won't have it the next. So everything is transitory, everything is changing, everything is always rotating into a new existence. And that's sort of Elegwa's function in the universe, realizing that maybe I really want to go down that road, but there's something that's stopping me. And whatever it is that's stopping me, I shouldn't get angry or nasty or take it out on other people. What I should do is realize that maybe there's something better for me on the other roads. And maybe the universe was guiding me towards another road for my own benefit, as opposed to denying my will that I'm so fiercely attached to that I have to stay on this particular path. So it's just a really different way of looking at things. And each one of the stories, you also see that the Orisha can also be fallible. And I think this is something that's also not really present in some of the other world religions. There's a famous story about Obatala, and we call Obatala the king of the white cloth. He's seen as the sort of Ashe, or the sacred energy of the sky. And whenever Obatala would go anywhere, he would wear this white cloth, and everybody would know he was the king of the white cloth because he was covered from head to toe in white. And there's a story about how he goes to visit Shango, and he takes his journey, and it's a long journey, and he steps in some mud, and he's like, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to go back. And then like a bird craps on his head or something, and at that point he's already 2 days journeyed away from his own home, so he decides to keep going instead of changing. And when he gets to Shango's castle, the guards at the door, he says, I'm Obatala, the king of the white cloth. And they say, you're a filthy beggar. And they put him in jail in the basement of the castle for months before Shango figures out that he's down there, and that's what's happened. So there's this kind of, even somebody who's amazing and great and a king can make mistakes and not present themselves adequately, and not do what they know they should, which is stay clean and stay focused and stay right-minded in order to get the success that they need. And even when they fail, they're also punished for it. So it's not this kind of division between, oh, the gods are just up there telling me what to do and infallible. They're equally fallible, just like us, and we can learn from their mistakes. We can learn from their mistakes and know that, oh, okay, if I'm going somewhere, I should make sure I'm prepared and I look my best, right? Like my grandmother lived through the Depression. She was like, put clean underwear on so they'll take you in the ambulance. I mean, luckily they have to take us in the ambulance now, but there was certainly an element of, if you weren't dressed your best, you would get poorer treatment, right? Like, and it still happens today. So this element of remembering that we have to do our best in order to get what we need and in order to navigate the universe effectively in a positive way. All right, so I did manage to put in the chat a couple of things that I did recommend here. There's a recommendation slide. Um, my book, Voodoo and African Traditional Religion, covers each of the things that we're going to cover, not in as great detail as we're going to cover them in the class, but in some pretty good detail. I do like, as I said, the Voodoo in Coastal Benin book. That is very helpful. I think this is one of the first books really to write about some of the voodoo practices in Benin in depth. A lot of people don't do that anymore. And I'm sure a lot of you are also familiar with my last book on the recommendation list is Robert Farris Thompson's Flash of the Spirit, African and Afro-American Art and Philosophy, which I think really gives a great overview of some of the, especially among the Yoruba, some of the art of the Yoruba and things like that, and how they conceive of this in a creative way and make meaning out of it in order to amplify and uplift the religion. Some people know Robert Farris Thompson. He was at Yale forever. I have a goddaughter who went to Yale, and she told me that the first day of classes, he gets out there with his drum and he drums all the students in to welcome them on orientation day. And then at graduation, he's there with his drum again to drum them out. And I thought that just sounded so beautiful, right? Like here's this old white African professor with his drum welcoming them, and then also welcoming them on their way out as they go on their next journey into these other worlds and other realms. And I just think that's a beautiful way of thinking of it. But he's got an amazing collection there at Yale of some of this art. There's also a lot of really amazing art that Donald Constantino from UCLA has put together related to voodoo and some of these things. He did a huge art show, voodoo art show about it, probably, wow, about 15, 20 years ago now, that toured around. That was amazing. But there's a big coffee table book about it. There's also a huge supply of the art at Rutgers, oddly enough. If anybody knows, I have a friend that's there. The two films that I recommend for you are From Brooklyn to Benin, from my friend Regine Romain, or Gigi. That's about her journey, her pilgrimage back to, I think the subtitle is A Vodou Pilgrimage. That's about her journey to Benin to discover her roots of the tradition. She's a Haitian American, and she spent some time there. There's also a really amazing film about Mami Wata that she talks about. And then the other big one, I don't even know where you can get it anymore, but the actor Jaimon Honsu did a film called In Search of Voodoo Roots to Heaven, which is really beautiful. And he's from Benin. So he talks about going back and trying to find some of the roots of this tradition that he grew up with and portray it in an accurate and respectful manner, as opposed to what he had seen in Hollywood that was so sensationalized and fake and all of those kinds of things. And he's got two really beautiful ceremonies for Mami Wata in that as well. One of them takes
What
place,
was the name of that again, Lilith?
the In Search of Voodoo Roots to Heaven from Jaimon Hansu. That managed to make it into that little teeny slide is in the chat under films. So I don't know. It was available everywhere, and now it seems to be pulled. So you're going to have to search for it if you want it. I did buy it. They had it on Netflix for a while. I did buy it, but I think he took it down. I don't know why. It's very sad to me, but it was very nice that he could actually go as a Beninois person to go back and talk about his religion, and also being who he is, right? Like he's famous. So if he says voodoo's cool, people are going to listen to him. So I was happy that he did it. And the rituals are amazing. The rituals are just fantastic. I mean, I love that he talks about Mommy Water, which is sort of the grandmother to all of us going back, right? So just honoring that divine feminine that's present in water. And she's not a specific, I mentioned Oshun before. Oshun is a specific water, river water, right? Like, and you get other deities like Yemaya, which we'll talk about when we get to Cuba, which is again the ocean, or the top of the ocean. But Mami Water is all water. So if you have a glass of water next to you, the ice in my coffee is Mami Water. So anywhere there's any water present, Mami Water is there. And since our bodies are mostly water and the earth is mostly water, Mami Water is all around us. And it's so beautiful to me that he talks about that and connecting to this ancient lineage of the divine feminine in Benin, and shows some really beautiful. He's got the money to take these beautiful pictures and put them in the film. So that's really beautiful. All right, I know that was a lot, and I apologize again for this lack of photographs, but I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm sure everybody has questions because this is even more confusing than I tried to make it. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone?
I was just gonna say, more of a comment, like seeing how you're going through it is very helpful because it's like I'm aware of a lot of it, but not where it was coming from. And so that's very helpful. So it's almost like getting the lineage tree, which is really, really cool to see. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I mean, when I wrote my first book, they wanted me to make a very clear map about this came from here and this did, and it's not like that. I mean, we can see it even now, it's not like that, right? Like there was so much migration and fluidity and reconstitution of belief. And we look at, I mean, people were going back to Africa as early as the 1600s to make sure they were getting it right? So like you've got slaves landing here in the 1700s and whatnot, and people going back almost immediately. Some of those early people that were brought over going back immediately to be like, oh, well, we don't have this. What am I use as an example? Cascarilla, right? Cascarilla is something they use in Cuba and New York and Haiti. It's basically powdered eggshell is what we use now for cascarilla. But if you go to Africa, cascarilla is actually a plant that they use. So they didn't have the plant here in North and South America, so they had to make a substitute. So what they use is powdered eggshell. But they did try and go back. I spent the weekend in New York. You can go to the Botanicas in New York. They still have fresh herbs there every Friday, so people can get exactly what they need fresh to do their baths, to do their cleansings, to do all those kinds of things. So doing it right was always really important from the beginning. But I can see how challenging it is now, and I can only imagine how challenging it was to get those ingredients and to get the information right? Like a lot of times when we look at hoodoo, they weren't allowed to read. So they weren't allowed to have a book except for the Bible. So then that became the magical text. And we've even seen some of these, like some of the sacred chants and whatnot, going back, you can see that a lot of it was preserved. I saw a news story the other day about a song that somebody's grandmother used to sing them to them in, Gullah country, and it got traced back to Senegal. It was the same song. So somehow hundreds of years they're still singing the same song. They saved the song, and it makes me want to cry, right? We saved the song, but so many other things were lost, so it's so sad. But yeah, the little arrows are helpful. This is kind of gives you an idea of where these things are coming from, but so much of it too was added on to with other things from the indigenous people in the area, right? Oh, Savannah has a question. What's your question, Savannah? You can unmute yourself.
Um, so my question is, okay, because I don't know maybe if I missed it. So you said there's Mami Wata and there's Papi Wata. And is it kind of like just like the same, like how you said there's like there's like Obatala that could be man or woman. Is it the same energy? Like what makes them, what separates them, I guess is what my question is.
I mean, you probably get as many answers as you ask people, right? Like from what I can see visually, we've got Mami Wata being this kind of double-tailed mermaid, usually image, whereas Papi Wata, the images for him look more land-based, right? He usually has three heads. I don't know what that's about. But you've got much more images where he's more of if they're both amphibians, she's in the water more often and he's on land more often. So it's kind of like she is in the domain of this watery depths of the ancestors, where he takes over more of the domain of the corporeal earth and the people that live on the land. And she's more in the people that live in the sea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
But again, I've never seen, other than looking at the statues that I found there and everybody saying that, oh, yes, we have Papiwata. I've never seen a ceremony for Papiwata. I've never heard of anyone doing a ceremony for Papiwata. So I don't know if he's just become less popular, right? Like a lot of these ones sort of fall out of favor because we're not the same society and other ones take on different things. Like over the weekend, I was talking about the deity Simbi, which used to just be this sort of water serpent or this fire serpent. Some people say it's the same as Damballa and Iudawedo. Some people say it's very different. Some people say Marie Laveau's snake was named Simbi, and that's where we get the word zombie. So there's a lot of this weird stuff going on. But now Simbi's taken over the internet. So now Simbi's in charge of the internet. My godson prays to Simbi whenever his lights go out because Simbi's electricity. So instead of calling up Comet Ed and yelling, he just lights a candle for Simbi and his lights go back on soon. So, you know, it
probably calls on Simbi.
Oh my gosh.
Images.
yeah. No, people use it how they use it, right? Like, and that's their relationship with it. So, and especially ones like Poppy Water, I think they really have fallen out of favor. There's not that much use for it. There's a deity in Haiti called a Zaka, which is kind of like the field hand, right? A lot of us are not out in the fields anymore, so that's not as popular now as it once was. Any other questions?
Thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. It was a good question. It's confusing though. Like I said, you know, I've spent the past probably 35 years talking to people, learning whatever I can, researching it, and sort of trying to catalog this huge amount of stuff. And there's always people that will tell you different things, you know. There are people who will be like, oh, Eshu always drinks whiskey. Well, in our house, he always drinks gin. Well, in our house, he's an alcoholic, you know, like there's always, and they're not wrong. You know, I explain it to people the same way that, like, if your grandmother had this recipe for her favorite thing that she made for the family and she made it that way, that's how you make it. But if somebody else's grandmother had their favorite recipe for this thing, that's right for their family. It's not necessarily right for you, but that's right for them. So, you know, you have to just understand it's nuanced and it's about these sort of family relationships and things. That's why I think it can't just be, you know, okay, I wrote a book about it. We say you can't get awo from a book, right? That's the Yoruba saying. And awo coming from the word babalawo, right? Baba meaning father and awo means sacred knowledge. So what we say is you can't get sacred knowledge from a book. So even though I write books, I know you can't get sacred knowledge from a book. It comes through doing, right? It's not about just reading the experience, it's about doing it. I could sit here all day and read about going to the beach and swimming in the ocean. That's not only going to give me a tiny idea of what it's like to really go to the beach and swim in the ocean and smell the sand and maybe get attacked by a seagull. Who knows what's going to happen to me if I go there? But that's very different than I just read about somebody else's account of going to the ocean. So that's why we say you can't get owl from a book, because it's just not, it's experiential. All right. Anything else before I wrap up? Yeah. All right. Well, again, I apologize. I will fix these pictures for next week. Oh, yeah. Question. Hey.
So it's the class is 4 weeks, right? Is it
No,
4
6 weeks.
6
weeks.
weeks. And is there like an outline? Did you send like of what we'll be doing each
Yes.
week? Is that in our email? Okay.
I sent a rough
Okay.
outline in the email, basically, you know, starting this one with, let me see if I pull it up here. Starting this week with the beginnings of the tradition, and then moving forward through each of the different paths. And then eventually, I mean, we'll talk about this next time, but eventually, yeah. So next week is New Orleans Voodoo and Low Country Hoodoo. The following week is Haitian Vodou. The week after that is Ifa in the diaspora and La Regla Lakumi. Week 5 is Obeya, Shango, Candomblé, and Umbanda. And week 6 is Ancestors Everywhere. And there's also going to be a working for that last one where I've got a sort of self-guided ritual where people can go to the cemetery or go visit some ancestors and come back and do some things and share.
I just copied it and pasted it in the chat because I happen to have it open.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So it's good to see.
Yay. Thank you. That's very helpful.
This so it I saw that it said that this class is recorded. Is that like available for us to like rewatch anywhere?
Yeah, I'm supposed to, I think, because this is my first class for Morbid Anatomy. The story is I send it to Morbid Anatomy and then they'll make it available somewhere for you.
Okay. Okay, so I'm guessing there'll probably be like an email or something like that sort.
Yeah,
Send it
yeah.
out quickly. Yeah, they usually send it out within 24 hours.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Definitely gonna rewatch it and make sure I didn't miss anything.
That's beautiful. All right, any final questions? Yeah, yeah. All right, again, I apologize for technical difficulties. See, I usually have them printed up and then I just hold them up, right? Like old school. I just hold them up for you. So I will have that as a backup next week. I will have a PowerPoint and I will also have them in the drive and see what happens. That's where I'm at.
No worries. It was great. Thank you. Do we use the same link? Keep using this?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
use the same link. That should keep working. All right, have a lovely night, everybody. I appreciate your time and bearing with me, and maybe I'll pray to Simbi next time, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.